before we go through introductions, I want to let everyone know that we have an interpreter here. Her name is Laura. And so Laura, you want to introduce yourself? And I'd like to remind everyone to put yourselves on mute if you're not speaking.
nhớ trong Colombia ya lo của ya tầm mong xalo trong này sẽ đó ya tên này linh tư xã to xalo mong nó là thọ nên nè lúc nó lúc gồm nhau cho họ cả chỉ này sai tên interpretation nó chỉ này mà đi khi cho nên một trò trong mong nè. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Laura. So Laura is here to help us with Hmong translation. She will also put the directions on how to get to the Hmong audio into the chat if folks want to hear that. So this will be recorded also in English, and then the other room, which is an audio room, is the Hmong audio, which will be recorded as well. And so then we will edit those and post these to the project website. So let me share my screen, and I think what we'll do, or before I do that, let's go through introductions. I think there's a few people that may be joining that are new, and I think it's always helpful to put a name with a face. And so I'll run through this, and we can do this quickly. Just say your name, your affiliation, or the neighborhood that you live in. And so we will start with Carol Brash.
Hi, I am Carol Brash, and I am here as someone who does research on classical Chinese gardens. And so I'm giving some advice to the advisory committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. And Carol will be presenting tonight on the Chinese design principles and philosophy. Ellen, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, I can. Ellen Stewart. I am also a landscape architect in Parks and Recreation with Brett.
Thank you, Brian.
My name is Brian Hammer. I'm a board member of the China Garden Society. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. Commissioner Chua?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Commissioner King, representing Parks and Rec.
Thank you. Donna?
Hi, my name is Donna Yang. I am with the Hmong Advisory Group Committee.
Thank you, Francis.
Hi, Brett. Hi, everyone. This is Francis Talk from the Hmong Advisory Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. How are you?
Hi, this is Hao Yu. I'm a landscape designer with the Chinese design community.
Thank you. Jeffrey?
Hi, I'm Jeffrey. I work for Parks and Recs, and I'm an office assistant. I'm going to be here as a project liaison.
Thank you, Jeffrey. And Jeffrey is the project liaison. Like you said, he's new. So welcome, Jeffrey. This was a request that we've heard from our community engagement process to have other representatives from the Parks and Rec staff on the call. Ji-Jun?
He might be a few minutes late.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, there he is.
This is Ji-Jun. I'm a member of the Chinese Advisory Committee.
Thank you. Kali?
Hi, my name is Kaoli Tao. I'm a visual and public artist.
Great. Thank you. Linda?
I'm Linda Mealy-Lohman. I'm the co-founder of the Minnesota-China Friendship Garden Society and past president for 15 years and current secretary.
Thank you. Councilmember Yang?
Hi, everyone. I'm Nelsie. I represent Ward 6 in St. Paul, which is where the China Friendship Garden is located. So nice to meet you all. My gender pronouns are she and her.
Thank you. Ping?
Hi, my name is Ping Wan. I'm the member of Chinese Advisory Group.
Thank you, Stuart.
My name is Stuart Knapp-Miller. I am on the board of the Minnesota China Friendship Garden Society, and I live near the southwest corner of Lake Phaling.
Thank you, Stuart. Bill and Romy.
So, Bill Zychek, and I'm the president of Minnesota China Friendship Garden Society, and a resident of Ward 6, Painfield Planning District Community Council, and live right on the park.
Yeah, Romy Sloya. I live on Lake Phaling, and I'm a board member, and I really love this project. And also, Bill are married, so you get 2 for 1.
Thank you, Christina.
Hi, I'm Christina Morrison. I'm the board member of Minnesota China Friendship Garden Society. I'm also a Chinese advisory committee member. Thank you.
Thank you, and Ying. Ying, you might be on mute.
Oh,
There
you
you
hear
go.
me now? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Ying, the chairman of Hmong Advisory Committee under China Friendship Garden Society.
Thank you, Ying. Is there anyone else that I missed? All right, well, let me share my screen.
Brett, could you
And,
tell us who's in the other room listening?
I don't think there is anyone else in the other room that's listening. That is our interpreter, Laura.
Okay.
I did not get any requests for interpretation. So if anybody knows of someone that is on the call, we can help direct them to that other Hmong audio room. Just type it in the chat if you know of anybody.
Brett, this is Jennifer.
Otherwise-
I think I accidentally unshared your screen. I apologize.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And
All right.
it appears that I did something wrong. The system Zoom is not letting me turn on the interpretation. So I'm afraid since no one has requested it, we might be all right. But if somebody does want a Hmong translation, we might have to briefly stop and restart the event just so I can take 2 seconds to change a setting.
Okay.
Do you have a preference?
I think we should keep going. I think
Okay.
If no one else is in the room, because that would require everyone to log off and log back on. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I think we'll keep going.
Okay.
And for future calls, we'll make sure that we have that. So thank you, Jennifer.
Yes. All right, then I'm going to make you the host. All right, there you go.
All right, thank you. Well, everyone, thank you for joining tonight. I know the weather's getting nice, but I think it helps that we are in this virtual world here where we can quickly get together for a meeting and then move on and enjoy our night. And I think hopefully soon at one of these meetings we can get together in person. And so I will introduce myself. If there are some new people here that jump on, my name is Brett Husong. I am a landscape architect and project manager with Parks and Recreation. And I've been working on this project for the last couple of years. And I started working on this with the construction of the Western Gateway. And so this is the 6th Design Advisory Committee meeting. Many of you have been involved to date. I would like to start off by saying, I don't think this is a step back. I think some of this that you're going to hear today is going to be repetitive, such as we're going to go through the design advisory role. There has been some confusion or some discussion about what is the specific role of this design advisory committee compared to others. We'll go back through the project background really briefly and touch on some of the Chinese design principles. I'd like to do this because I want to bring folks that are new, along with the ideas, principles, philosophies of a Chinese garden. And then I would like to get or have discussion on the plaza size, the Hmong Plaza, specifically that element. It's been a couple meetings since we have brought the whole group together to discuss the size and location. And so I just want to remind everyone to please keep yourself on mute. If you have any questions, please raise your virtual hand. And like I said, the meeting will be recorded and we will post this to the project website. And the website is located here at the bottom. And this will be shown at the end also. And so we'll go through the roles here shortly. We'll go through the Chinese garden design principles, and then we'll talk about the Hmong Plaza. So we may not be here for the full hour and a half, but I do want to note there has been some other discussion on the other topics in the garden. And so that is about the art stones that have been installed. And so this meeting will not talk about that topic, but I want to say that the city has released a statement about the art stones. And in the meantime, we are moving forward with the design advisory meetings because of funding deadlines and to keep this progressing. And I'll get into a little bit more about the funding deadlines. And we are in this process will help understand the permanent placement of these art stones because they are in a temporary location outside on site right now. So for those of you that have not been into a typical meeting with Parks and Recreation, we want to point this out and just show what are the factors that go into the design process and what go into implementing a project with the city. And so we can start here with our system. We have a systems plan that we use to understand what are the priorities and goals of our department itself. So we look at that. We have the context of the site with Phelan Regional Park. We've got other budget constraints that we're looking at. We have our operations and maintenance. We need to understand how they are going to operate the site and what are the best methods to construct this. We have regulatory officials such as the DNR, the watershed district that we need to follow. And then we have the community, which is you, and this is part of that design advisory process. So there's a lot of factors that go into designing and planning a project. And so I want to touch on the role, and this is what has been a question for some of you. I know we've been emailing each other, and I've met some of you in person. And so this design advisory committee is a process that is formed by the city, so by Parks and Recreation. And so as part of the phase 2 project, we have pulled everyone together. And so the advisory committee, the purpose of it is to bring ideas to the design advisory committee. So you are the leaders of your community. You are coming here with ideas, and then you are taking what you hear and taking those ideas back to the community for a discussion. And so we are utilizing you as the conduit to come back and forth when we meet regularly. And one thing I want to point out is decisions are made by consensus, not by votes. And one question is who makes up the design advisory committee? So the committee is in whole, it's one large group, and it's made up of the Minnesota China Friendship Garden Society Board. It is made up of representatives on the Hmong Advisory Committee, which is underneath, it's an umbrella of the Minnesota China Friendship Garden Society. But not all members are on the Design Advisory Committee. So they have a dual role. So we have some representatives from there. We have representatives from the Chinese Advisory Committee. We have representatives from the 18 Hmong Council that are new to date. So Paul Zhang, I did not introduce him, but he has been on the last several meetings. We have residents of the Payne-Phelan Planning District. We have artists and design professionals, and we will be having representatives from the St. Paul Youth Commission, and then we have Commissioner Chang from Parks and Recreation Commission. So the design advisory is made up of a collection of people, and the idea is to get as many voices on the project, and that creates the transparency and really advances and makes the project even stronger. So the garden location, I just want to give a background. A lot of you know where this is at. It's located on the northwest side of Lake Phalen, on the north side of the channel. One thing that is important that I do want to point out is the funding. So we have a couple funding sources. We have one that we have been approved, and that is the Arts and Cultural Heritage Legacy Fund. And so that is what we are using right now to fulfill this phase 2 process. That deadline ends June of 2023. So that is next spring or end of spring, right into summer. And so thinking about this project, we still are in the planning stages, and we need to move into construction documents and bidding with the hopes of breaking ground with the construction this fall. We also have state bonding that we've been approved, but we are going through the application and agreement process. And that should happen shortly, I would say within the coming months. And then generally, once the agreement is established, we have several years to use that funding. So we do have 2 funding sources. One is a little bit closer to the deadline. So we are here. We started in October. We've gone through 6 meetings, and we will most likely go through May with the phase 2 design and community engagement. Once that is completed, I anticipate in May or August, we can begin the construction document phase where we work with our design professionals and we really get all of the details figured out and develop construction documents that contractors can use. We will then hopefully break ground this fall. As long as we can construct, we will do that throughout the winter. If we need to shut down, we will pick back up in spring with hopes of substantial completion of the funding, the legacy funding. And then we would end that process with the hopes of the state bonding kicking in, which would complete any other construction that we have. I will also say that as part of this process, this is the second phase. So the first phase, for those of you who have not been involved, we are sister city with Changsha, China, and this was developed in 1998. And recently in 2015, we have put together this master plan, and we also had an agreement with Changsha to trade gifts. So we were giving the pavilion, and we in lieu of that, we provided Peanuts characters, and one of the characters was designed by Kao Li, who is on the call, in traditional Hmong traditional wear or a dress. So as part of that first phase, we built the pavilion, which is located here, and we built the Western Arch. What we are on to next is phase 2, which includes the Hmong Plaza, includes the front garden and seating area. It's basically an extension of the pavilion landscape. We are looking at the donor wall and the moon gate. We are also designing the moon bridge, and then off to the side of the plaza, it is a chess table. And here's another view. This is from the master plan, and this is showing the location again in an aerial view of the plaza, pavilion landscape, the chess table off to the east side of the pavilion, the donor wall and moon gate, and the moon bridge. And so with a lot of these components here on the east side, we have discussed that. So for those of you who have not been involved, we will get to those items. One of the more pressing items is the Hmong Plaza, the size and location that we want to talk about today. So before I get into that, this is the image of the garden, which was designed by our artist or our architect and landscape architect, Jennifer Hunan Jiangqi, firm in China. And so this was a highly developed Chinese garden, and everything was completed for a reason. And I want to bring those of you along that have not been involved with the project and talk about some of the Chinese garden design principles and philosophy before we get into the discussion of the Hmong Plaza. So Carol, I will allow you to take control and to share your screen to go through some of your design principles.
Hello, everyone. I'm a professor of art history specializing in Chinese art at the College of St. Benedict, St. John's University, and I study Chinese gardens. I started off studying 16th century gardens and became very interested in the translations of gardens to other parts of the world, which is how I got involved in this project. And so I'm going to talk very briefly about some very basic elements and principles. If this is going to be a very short version of a very complex topic. So if you have questions, do feel free. On the last slide, I'll have my contact information, and you should feel free to let me know if you want to know more. Okay, so I'm going to cover sort of 3 questions very briefly: how these gardens developed, and then focusing primarily on the elements and primary principles, and then thinking about how they apply to some parts of our project that are already completed. So thinking about the development of Chinese gardens, they are thousands of years old, right? There have been garden building going on in China, or the area we now call China, for thousands of years. But over that long history, the idea of a garden really shifted from something that was more like a park or a productive kind of garden space to something that's focused primarily on aesthetics. And so a space that is serving primarily aesthetic purposes by the 16th century. And that's the sort of garden that we're looking at. Basic elements, and I'll talk a little bit more about the elements as we go through the principles, but just to list them here for those that aren't familiar, Chinese gardens have different elements than gardens in other parts of the world. And the primary standout feature to a lot of folks would be the rocks, right? Lots of rocks and water. And the rocks can also be stand-ins for mountains. Architecture is a big part of the Chinese garden, and plants, of course. Views, and by views I mean very consciously, intentionally created views for people enjoying the garden to see. The arts are a very important part of the design of the garden, but also as an element of the garden. So poetry, painting, calligraphy in particular, and then that leads to the naming of the sites in the gardens and the gardens themselves, which will arise from these artistic elements. Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, here we go. Let's use that instead. So the first principle I want to talk about is the most important one, and that is that a garden should not merely imitate nature, but work in harmony with it. And so that's something that I know we've been trying very hard to do at this site, using the gifts of the sites, the things that are already there, and working with what is there. But then considering the overall scene, looking for picturesque views, creating some more intimate artistic views, balancing static and dynamic. So having parts of the garden where you're moving to see things, having parts of the garden where you're standing still to see things. And always considering the balance of creating interest, but not at the not sacrificing harmony in creating that interest. And what that tells you, right, is that a garden happens by design, not by accident. And like any other form of art or architecture, it requires often specialized training. One of the elements I mentioned, right, were the poetry and the connection of literary arts. And so poetic descriptions contribute to the naming. They can explore the values or emotions of the designer or the viewer or both. They frequently reference Confucian, Taoist, or Buddhist ideas. And they can be drawn from poetry or from other literary forms as well. And so, for instance, here you see above this moon gate, right, a reference to reading the landscape done in calligraphy. And so that would be one example of how that might come into a garden site. Another principle, using the element of paintings and art, that art form in the gardens. So landscape paintings in particular might be the inspiration for a view in the garden where rocks might be built up in a particular way to represent a very specific mountain. Or it might be that artistic principles from calligraphy or poetry or painting might be imbued into a particular part of the garden. And certainly throughout the history of gardens as aesthetic sites in China, art was viewed in the garden and also made in gardens. Gardens are thought of as a living painting, and particularly in sort of the southern part, when you have a literary style garden, say from Suzhou, white walls are used to create the effect of an ink painting using shadows of plants and so forth. So for example, something like this, or creating views with using architecture to create views. Architecture is not just a part of the view that you might see from a distance, but when you're in the architecture, intentionally thinking about which way you're situating a window or an opening to capture a beautiful view like a painting. And so these were cited specifically for capturing those views. Pathways are created in a way that zigzag or move back and forth so that sometimes a view is revealed or blocked temporarily so that the viewer then can be surprised by it and have a sense of mystery. And it also gives a sense that the garden is much larger than it might actually be. And for example, the borrowed view here through a moon door, or a borrowed view of a pagoda that isn't even on the site, that's at the temple next door. So those are some of the basic ideas, and we are certainly working on applying those, and I hope we'll keep them all in mind as we continue to move forward with the project. So, we already have some poetic inscriptions and inspirations, both, on the gateway, on the sides of the pavilion here and on this beautiful rock. We have some potential to create some wonderful framed views from the piece of existing architecture that we have. And so here are what is currently out of 3 of the sides. And so as we're designing the areas around this structure, we need to be mindful of what is that going to look like in terms of a framed view. And also borrowed views, say, of the lake from various places in the garden, or borrowed views of some elements of the garden from other elements of other sites in the garden. So these are just a few of the very basic elements and principles. I know that was really fast and really brief, really condensed. So if you want to follow up, I'm happy to answer your questions, and my email is there. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Okay, so that's a little bit of a background about the project, where we've been. I know we presented this previously at the first couple meetings, but I think this is a good refresher to understand the design principles and backgrounds behind the Chinese garden itself, and how we should be thinking about these spaces. And so the last time we had a discussion about the Hmong Plaza, this was several months ago now, the last time we had the whole group together. And so I'll give you a little bit of background. The master plan was completed in 2017, and many of the elements in there were Chinese elements, and there was a request for a Hmong Plaza and a Hmong heritage wall. So as part of the pavilion that was constructed, if you go out there, there's this beautiful Hmong heritage wall that is framing in the backdrop of the pavilion. And so that was incorporated along with a lot of the design principles that Carol just talked about, and incorporated during that phase. And so that portion of the Hmong element was incorporated then, and now we are going through phase 2, and we have received the funding to complete the Hmong Plaza. And the last that we discussed, there was some disagreement over the size of the plaza and of the location. If you remember, we went through different locations, different sites that were off of the Chinese garden itself. So I just want to point out that we are still at the phase. Tonight, I'm verifying the size, the location. Once we are done with that, then we are going to go into a lot of the detailed design that we have discussed, a lot of the patterns, the cultural symbols, and we'll advance the design as we approve it tonight. And so to recap our discussion, if you don't remember, and for those who are new to this, what we heard is that there is a desire for 200 people. So we wanted a space that could hold 200 people on the Hmong Plaza itself. The original design had anywhere between 50 to 100. And I think that was due to a lot of the way the plaza was arranged, and we'll get into that. We also heard that a 200-person plaza would not be in harmony with an intimate Chinese garden. And so we heard that from a lot of our design professionals that are on the call. So we considered an alternate site. This could be outside of the garden. We looked at areas closer to the picnic pavilion in Lake Phalen or in the park. We looked at other areas that were just next to the bridge as you're walking up to the China Garden site. But after we went through a lot of those scenarios, even though there was a lot of space, what we heard is that this would be outside of the garden. And the idea of the Friendship Garden is to promote friendship. So we do not want to put a Hmong Plaza that is outside of the China Garden itself. And this last fall in September, we completed a blessing and a site dedication to the Hmong Plaza itself. So there's a lot of good reasons to keep the plaza on the site and not to move it off site, even though there might be more space, there might be other utilities, there might be other amenities that could support it. The decision, I think, from what I've heard from people, is to keep it on site. And so after we've been working internally, talking with a lot of members of the Design Advisory Committee and looking at our site and the design, Parks and Recreation has come up with a solution, and that is to maximize the available footprint. So the original footprint that had been designed in the master plan, the 2017 master plan, we would use that, but we'd maximize it by adjusting how it is laid out. And so that increases the size a little bit by 250 square feet. And you'll see where this has been increased. But we've also provided a flexible grass open space to accommodate larger groups. So this will be an overflow space that can accommodate up to the 200 people as requested. And so this is the balance of having the desire of 200 people, but also keeping in harmony with the intimate Chinese garden. And so some of the considerations that we should think about with this solution is the proposed plaza does increase from the original 2,600 square feet that's in the master plan to roughly 2,800 square feet, or it could be more. But what I'm going to show you here is around 250 square feet more. just by adjusting the layout. The overflow would need to be irrigated in order to maintain use during the summer months. As part of the use of the turf, it needs to be accessible and needs to be flat. And so regrading and retaining walls would be required. And finally, with a plaza this size, we would have to follow any permitting and typical fees that Parks and Recreation has for larger groups. And just thinking about the use of Phelan and other uses surrounding the China Garden, this would allow roughly 8 to 10, and this is a rough idea, 8 to 10 rentals per year, because if we do have larger groups that are at the China Garden, then there is competition for parking and other uses at the picnic pavilion. So there would be trade-offs on weekends, and we would be working with the Parks and Recreation staff to understand when there are other events happening and to balance those needs. So let me go through and look at the site a little bit and talk about some of those considerations that I just talked about. And so the first thing I want to point out is the dashed line that you see. This is the original layout and footprint that was proposed by the Chinese designers, and that was proposed in the master plan. That size you can see is 2,600 square feet roughly, and you can see how the backside of it does go in and out to create some of these smaller rooms. And this is where I was talking about reallocating space. If we would take these smaller rooms out to create more of a cohesive and larger plaza, then you can utilize these spaces that were once unable to be utilized in a larger setting. And so that opens it up. This is where we are getting the additional 250 square feet. And so staying with for the most part, the footprint on the south, the west, and the east sides, we are expanding it 250 square feet on the north side to get to approximately 2,848 square feet. And I'll get into what that means for usage and for the approximate people that could use the space. As part of this, I talked about having an overflow space. And so in the light green area, this is the overflow space. In order for this to be flat and to be utilized, we would have to have, we'd have to have a retaining wall of some sort. And so we would work with our design professionals, and we would construct a retaining wall or design a retaining wall that would be roughly 4 feet tall to accommodate flatter and ADA accessible walkway or turf grass. As part of this scenario, we would want to, if this is an overflow space, we would design some type of barrier with seating, excuse me, with trees or ground cover. And as part of this scenario, we would also reroute the bike path behind the existing archway that could go around the site itself. And this would open this up to more of a pedestrian type area or space, and hopefully restrict a lot of the bikes and scooters or anything that's going to be moving faster. Excuse me. So I'd like to go in and talk a little bit more about what this size is and how that relates to people using the site. So this is an image that I think many of you have seen, and we have actually staked this on site. This is the potential size of the Hmong Plaza. And you can see there's a stake here. And so this is showing the rough footprint that was proposed in 2017. It eliminates the areas that were coming inside, so it's one large plaza. And so just to give you an idea of what it looks like on site, this is the 2,800 or to 3,000 square foot plaza. I'm putting 3,000 because if you would use these areas, you could get to 3,000, but if we stuck with the footprint, expanded it a little bit, you would get to this 2,800 square feet. With 2,800 square feet and figuring approximately 15 square feet per person, at 2,800 square feet, you can get 185 people on this site. But what I want to point out is if you want to get to 200 people, that would be 3,000 square feet. But I think then that begins to expand the site. And so if we're sticking with the 2,800, we could get 185 square feet or 185 people, but that does not necessarily count for aisles or for a stage or for a podium. So I think that's very important for you to understand that while the whole plaza could fit 185 people, if you had an event that needed a stage or you needed aisles for seating, for circulation, it would reduce the plaza size down to 157 to 170 people. So that's taking out 15% of the usage. So I want to put that in perspective of the amount of people that we're talking about with this size of a site. And remember, we're trying to create this balance, and we have a lot of other priorities in the city. We have a deadline that we're trying to reach, and we also have the priority of a Chinese garden, where we have that intimacy and harmony that we are trying to achieve. And so here's another rendering that I think some of you have seen of the Hmong Plaza. This was created by the Chinese designers, and it shows the overflow space. I am deliberately hiding the Hmong Plaza at this point, excuse me, because a lot of these details have not been worked through. Excuse me. And so with this scenario, you can see how the grass lawn could be utilized. You can see that there is a buffer in between the walkway and any events that could be held here. Just keep in mind, this hasn't been designed, but the idea is to create that physical barrier. While it might not be fully visually a barrier, it does use borrowed space. So this does not seem like it is a built plaza that is made out of concrete or that is made out of pavers, but it uses the borrowed landscape. And so the site design uses the flat irrigated turf and overflow space, which supports a plaza that can hold 157 to 170 people. It doesn't necessarily hit that 200, but I think we've gone a long ways to accommodate some more people without drastically expanding the footprint. This maintains ADA accessibility with designing a wall in the background to make it flat. And like I said, this balances the intimacy, harmony of the Chinese garden that Carol just talked about. And all together, keeping this on site, I believe it will promote friendship. I think if we took this off site where there's more available space, I think that that gets away from the whole idea of the garden itself. And this scenario or this concept allows the project to advance into design development. I just want to remind everyone that we do have that funding deadline. And so this keeps the project on course, and we can begin design development and working with our design professionals. So the next step is Parks and Recreation will take this layout and this scenario and move forward with phase 2 design development, which is pulling together a subcommittee full of that would be the artists, design professionals, and the city. We would take a lot of those ideas and begin to design a lot of these spaces, including the Hmong Plaza, the donor wall, the Moon Gate, and the Moon Bridge. So the next phase would move into all of those cultural symbols, patterns that we want to get into. So I want to stop there before I go into any other details. The intent is to move forward with this layout of 2,800 square feet. It's not necessarily going to look exactly like this. This is really a conceptual plan to show you how it could function and how it could work on site. So I will open it up to questions that people may have.
hands up thing.
How do I
Hands
do
up.
that?
I don't know.
All right, I'm not seeing any hands up. Oh, there you go. Romy, I see you have your hand up there.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I know we've come a long way to get to this point, and I am fairly comfortable with it, but the one thing I do want to express concern about is that large swath of what you call turf, just to make sure that the landscape architects consider something that seems a little less like a golf course, something like Bill suggested Kentucky blue stem when I mentioned this, or sedge, or some kind of a sedge, or something that's more flowing or lyrical. So I just thought I'd throw that out there, because that does not, the way it looks, feel very Chinese to me. That's all I have to say.
He's on mute.
Thank you, Romy. I think we'll leave that up to the designers, the artists and professionals to figure out how that is going to look based upon a lot of those design principles. But the most important thing is to keep the ADA accessibility as part of that, as part of this overflow space. So thank you. All right, Donna, I see your hand is up.
Okay, I understand the whole process, system and everything. Can we request 50 feet, like along the sidewalk, 50 feet, and then 56 feet to the hillside? So that would be the total of 2,800 square feet.
Yeah, Don, are you specifically referring to the model that you have constructed and referring to those dimensions?
Yeah, 50 by 56, total of 280. It's not even 3,000.
Yep. So this scenario is under 3,000, and I think we will look at some of those details on how it fits on the site. I think one concern that we have is the hillside begins to creep up fairly fast, so that's why this is more horizontal. I guess if we're looking at it north-south on the sheet versus more vertical into the hill. So I think we're trying to utilize the site in order to fit it within the boundaries, because what I've also heard is we do want some space for the plaza to breathe a little bit along the path. And Donna, I will point out that I'm going to show your model here shortly after we get through this discussion. Ying.
Yes, I would like to talk about the floor, because the last couple of times that we went to China, and in Guizhou province, is the Lixiang County, and the village of Xijiang, what the village of Xijiang, and all the floor that they have in the this open space, or the part, or the ceremony space, and the floor are designed, very special design, with the monk art on the floor, with the rock, the small rock. And then I would like to suggest the floor to be some similar in Xijiang, in Lixiang County, because that is a friendship garden between U.S. and China, or Minnesota to Hunan. That is not Hunan, but we saw the floor, and very, very, very beautiful floor with the art design, with the little rock. And then we would like to have that idea on the Mount Plaza floor. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ying. I think we will get in, or I know we will get into those details once we start working with the smaller subcommittee. It's going to be with people such as Kaoli Tao, and she's going to help figure out what are those details, what are the patterns we want to use, what is the surface we want to use based upon her knowledge with our climate too. I think a lot of that has to go into it. Yin, can I ask you a question about specifically about the size of the plaza and the idea of the overflow space? Do you have
Yeah,
any
I think
comments
that-
about that?
Yeah, I think that I support Dana just mentioned 3,000 square footage. And then I think that we also talk about the overflow capacity on the grass. So I think that we should okay for that.
Okay, thank you. I think we're looking at in this scenario, it's 28 or 2845. So it's a little short of the 3,000. And I think that's why we are using this overflow space. I think if we're looking at this as our next design iterative, or when we're coming through with the design development, we could take a look at what that 3,000 would look like. But as far as advancing, I think that from what we've heard from the design professionals, we do not want to expand this much larger. We want to keep this at the 2850 and utilize the overflow space. Donna, do you have another question?
Yes. Well, with that, this is the first Mall Plaza in US, or maybe through the whole world, and this is the only one. And we should make it a little bit more visible to the whole world to see. And also, this is a project that we come together and you want to make it a little bit more exciting so that we can get more donors to help us, get this going. And then after we finish this, the whole world will come in and everybody will come into the city, will stop by, will take a look and see what we did so far and why we have so much problem. And they want to come in and take picture. And we want this garden or this mall plaza to be impressed, to be visible, to exciting and welcome. And it's going to start 1,000 years, who knows? And so we want to make it beautiful. And we want to see it. And like last time I heard on our meetings, some people said we don't want it just like a cemetery, like a tombstone. We want something like splendid, beautiful. When you come and look at, when you say, wow, no wonder people are fighting about this. It's so beautiful. That's all I want to say.
Yes, thank you, Donna. And I completely agree with you. As part of the next phase in the process, we are going to go into a lot of those characteristics that are going to make this a unique site and that are going to make it beautiful. Right now, we're talking about a footprint, and I think we do have a little ways to go, and we can get a lot of those cultural aspects that you've pointed out that we'll go through here shortly, based upon your design, and we can take some elements that were in the master plan or in that redesign. So there's more to come, and I think we will be getting to that point immediately after this meeting. That's our next step. Are there any other comments about specifically the plaza size and the idea of the overflow space? Because once we have that down, we're then moving into a lot of those details, a lot of the fun stuff that Donna's talking about. Well, I'm going to jump in with that. So like I said, our next phase, so taking the idea of this 2,800 square foot plaza with the overflow space, we are going to now be going into the designs to look at a lot of these characteristics that make the plaza unique. And so we've gone through a few iterations. And so for those who have not been involved with the project, this top left picture was a rendering of the 2017 master plan. And I think there's some elements that people liked about this, but there's also other ideas that we've heard and where we think that this will get redesigned. The Chinese designers took made some revisions, and they redesigned this. And this is what Don is referring to as something that maybe looks a little bit colder. It's got more rectilinear features. And there is some discussion about the actual feature, this main archway that's in the back. And so this is the first time I'm showing this officially to the group. This is a model that was created by the Hmong Advisory Group that really begins to get at a lot of the symbols and a lot of the patterns that we want to incorporate into the plaza. Donna was talking about that, Ying was talking about the actual surface. And so the next phase is to go into the design development, is what we are calling this next phase. So we've started with schematic design. We've really refined our locations, the sizes, conceptually, where everything's going to be located. Now we will move into design of the plaza itself. We'll move into design of the donor wall, the moon gate, the moon bridge. And so I just want to point this out. This was sent by Donna, who's done a lot of great work on providing us a lot of the characteristics that the Hmong advisors like to see. And we've heard a lot of this in previous meetings. And so I just briefly want to go through some of these, the characteristics of the 3,000 square feet. Well, I think we're trying to balance that with the needs of an intimate garden. So we are around 2,800, and that's the reason for the overflow space. But they've also identified some of the Hmong migration wall and showing a Hmong necklace with the instruments that are on the sides here. This is showing a raised platform, but it also has the butterfly, elephant's foot, and the phoenix that are really important features that should be incorporated into the plaza itself. We've also heard of using the grinding stone sculpture. So we've heard a lot of these items, including the women's headdress that's on top of the wall here. There's a lot of these features that, with your help, that we now understand are the important features of the Hmong Plaza itself. And we've also heard a lot of those features for the donor wall, the moon gate, and the moon bridge. And so there's a lot of considerations to think about, even with all of these features. And we're talking about the scale, the orientation, the symbols, and then the maintenance and materials. So there's a lot of those elements when we talk about the city as a whole, about our systems plan, about regulations, about operations and maintenance that we need to think about. And so our next step, as we leave tonight, we are going to form a subcommittee, and we are going to move into this design development stage. And so this subcommittee will be made up of the design professionals, artists like Kali Tao, and there's other professionals that are on this call right now that have a lot of expertise in site design and Chinese garden design, and even understanding a lot of the Hmong cultures, whether it's the migration story. We're going to work to refine these elements and come back to the design committee in April. So we will form a smaller committee that will come up with the ideas. We will refine that, have illustrations that you can understand, and we will come back and have design advisory committee number 7. Are there any questions about that process and our next steps moving forward?
Brett, this is Linda. I just have one question about the Hmong symbolism, because a lot of these symbols are already on the heritage wall. And I wonder if these are the only symbols that the Hmong Advisory Committee wants on here, or whether there are any other symbols so we could add some additional cultural content in this area. So my question is whether this choosing of the cultural symbols will be happening in the next stage, or has this already been decided?
Thank you, Linda. I think that's a good question. I will say that if there are other symbols that are important to people, please send them my way. I will say that the symbols have not been decided or determined at this point. I think we are going to rely on our design professionals and artists to determine, based upon what we've heard from the community and from the Design Advisory Committee, what are those special symbols and patterns that should be included. And we also have to keep in mind that we are trying to balance this with the Chinese garden design. So please let us know if there are other symbols, and we can get those incorporated into the next round of designs. And I think that goes with the Hmong migration story. So we do have that wall that I talked about that is behind the pavilion. I think if you have any suggestions about what should be on that wall, if it should be the story, a migration story, if it should be more of an embroidered pattern, those type of things. If there's anything else, please let us know. But it is our intention to move forward over the next month to redesign all of these features and come back to the Design Advisory Committee. So you could anticipate seeing something in mid-April. Any other questions? Yes, Donna.
Okay, to answer the Linda, I think you look at the picture that you show us right now. Underneath the tongue, there's 4 bays underneath it. So it's 2 for the south, and there's 1 each column. That means 4 bays, and around each base there's 4 sides. So total there's 16 sides that we can put more elements around it. So can you see? So there's 16 space that we can put more elements. We have lots of elements, but because we don't have space, so that's why we create the little base that's 4, 4, and 3 tall, so we can have the symbol around each base. The total is 16 spot for the elements.
Thank you, Donna. You're breaking up a little bit. I'm having a hard time understanding that. I've got the design. I think what's important is we will work with you on all of those details to make sure we're getting all of those elements in the plaza. I think, could you send me any more details, or just write out specifically what you're trying to describe? I apologize. It's breaking up on my end.
Yeah, I know. And right now we just want the space first. So once we get the total space, then we know what to do.
Yeah, I think the total space that we're looking at right now is the 2,800 square feet with the overflow. I think we'll understand how it is laid out. Like I mentioned, you are showing the 60 feet by 50 feet, but I think we need to understand the restrictions on the site where we have a hill coming down. I'm not quite sure that we could get 50 feet, push this back 50 feet, where I think we need to make it wider.
Well, we can reduce the 60, we can do 50 on our face, 50 by 56. That means a total of 2,000 acres.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll look at that size of footprint, and then we'll bring that back for review and see if that fits on the site. Councilmember Yang, do you have a question, comment?
Thanks. Yeah, I have a comment and question. I wanted to respond to Linda. My first reaction to the design here on the PowerPoint is that it really does include many of our main Hmong fundal patterns. So I see right off the bat, the elephant's foot, the snail, and the heart incorporated all into that very center design, which is really nice. And so I do agree that it'd be really good for anyone who's interested in providing input to this to make sure you stay in close connection with like whoever is on the subcommittee for the design. And my question is, for the subcommittee of design professionals and artists, we won't be having any advisory board members on that. Is that correct? Because based on your bullet point here, that's kind of what it seems. And it was intended to be that way.
So it's intended, that's a good question. Thank you, Councilmember Yang. It's intended to be design professionals that do have background in either Chinese garden design, or they have background in Hmong culture and the design of what should be put on the migration wall. And so we're trying to stick with design professionals and utilize those people as a subcommittee. And so some of them are on the advisory committee.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. So it sounds like there will be a pathway for advisory board members or even folks who like want to give input to be able to do that and provide it directly to that subcommittee then.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay,
we do want to be as transparent as possible. I think what we're trying to do here is we have a large group that's on the design advisory committee. And I think to be the most effective and to move forward, we're really trying to make that a little bit smaller with the design professionals that can bring a plan together that meets all the design principles and philosophy that they have in their training. And then we do want to bring that back to the design advisory committee so everyone has a chance to react to it. But during the process, we do want to hear about what are a lot of these features. So like Councilmember Yang said, please let us know what are those special features if they are not shown or if they are shown on. All right, anything else? Bill, Romy, you have your hand up.
It's actually me. This is a very practical item. Let's make sure that we have power at the plaza. So I don't know how much power we need, but we have 2 outlets that were put in kind of as an afterthought at the pavilion, and we should be, the power at the plaza should not be an afterthought.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you, Bill. All right, anything else, or I can move on? We briefly talked about this already, but the next steps. And so we have, thank you all, you've made it this far. We've had 6 design advisory committees. And so now we are moving into the design development stage, and we will get a lot of these details that we were just talking about. And so I want to give our subcommittee time to form, have some discussion about what are the important features, give you time to put some of those, email some of those features to us, and allow our subcommittee to design something that we can react to. And so I hope to have another meeting here in a month. That gives the subcommittee a solid 3 or 4 weeks to get something together. And so the idea is the subcommittee will meet once. We'll have design advisory committee number 7. The subcommittee will go back together, meet again, refine the plans. So refine the Hmong Plaza, refine the donor wall, the moon gate, and the moon bridge, and bring those back again for design advisory committee number 8. And so I anticipate that would happen in early to mid-May. And I think it would be important to have an open house. So I do have a public review in May. So some of these could maybe be combined, the design advisory committee and the public review, maybe that could be combined and we could have an open house on site. So I think that is yet to be determined. Once we have a solid understanding of the major elements, then we can begin construction documents. So I want folks to understand that we may not have the whole Hmong migration wall designed, or whatever we want to put on that. We may not have that fully designed, but we will have the wall, we will have the footprint, we will have the footings designed where we could move forward with some of the construction while we are finalizing some more of those intricate details and critical stories. So the next phase that's important is the design development, and we hope for construction and bidding later this fall. So I will leave it there. Any last questions? Otherwise, we are done a little bit earlier tonight. I do have my contact information here if you do not have that, if you're new. And then this is also the project website. This is where everything will be posted. Please, as leaders of the Design Advisory Committee, you are the ones to take this back out to your network. And also, if there are people missing that are not on the committee, please let me know. I have also updated on the website, I have updated our committee list itself. And so you can pull that up and you can show your network who is on the committee and if we're missing anybody else. So thank you. Enjoy your night. You have an extra 15 minutes. We will be moving forward in design development, and you can hear from me soon. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.